Welcome to Master B2B, the world's first and only online and offline community of B2B e-commerce executives. I'm excited to be here today. My name is Brian Beck. I'm here with Andy Hoar. Those of you who don't know Andy, he is a longtime veteran of the e-commerce field in B2B. He ran Forrester Research's B2B e-commerce practice for 7 years. He's the founder of Paradigm B2B. And a longtime industry researcher, veteran practitioner, all the rest. Andy, welcome to our webcast.
Well, it's great to be here, Brian. It was very kind of you to go through the full introduction again. It feels like it's been ages since we've introduced each other. But right. For those of you who don't know Brian, Brian is, he's been a consultant. He's been a practitioner on both the B2B side at Harbor Freight Tools, B2C side at PacSun. He also wrote a book called $1 Billion B2B Commerce, and he is my partner here in the Master B2B Thought Leadership Series. So, Brian, great to be here, and this is going to be a really fascinating topic. We've got some great guests and some great material to share. Yeah,
we're going to talk about accelerating your digital vision and that music leading up to it. Boy, I felt like I was traveling through hyperspace. Robert, great job on that. On the intro there. That was awesome.
My hair's windswept. I don't know if you noticed.
I know, right? Exactly. I felt like I was on the Millennium Falcon or something. Anyway, folks, we got a great session today, but before we dive into it, a few housekeeping items. If you have questions, please submit them through the Q&A. We have a lot of people joining our webcast today. It's going to be an exciting topic, popular one. We'll get into that a little bit later. This is being recorded, so you will have a copy of this at the end. For those of you who registered and attended. So, Andy, we've got a lot to talk about. We even have a co-host today from our collaborator, our supporter of this webcast and this research, commercetools. We'll introduce Julia in just a few minutes. So, Andy, we're talking about accelerating your digital vision. So we did some work on this last year around a maturity model. And this is really the next stage of it. You want to take us through kind of framing up what we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, 3-year, 3-part series. Last year, we kind of laid the foundation. We created the framework, which we'll kind of review here in a moment. This year, we're introducing this document, which is now available, called Taking Your Strategy to the Next Level, which is really about how do you accelerate yourself through the various stages of maturity, which we'll talk about in a moment. And the good news is next year, there's no cover art for this one yet, but next year there'll be the third part in the series where you'll actually we'll kill off all the characters and we'll come to a conclusion.
Right.
No, I kid you, but just so you know, there's a third part coming up. So, like I said, this year we're focused on the taking a strategy to the next level. For those of you who can see this on screen, you can actually go to masterb2b.com/accelerating your digital vision. We also put it in the chat window.
Right.
You can go download this document. It's available as we speak. We wanted to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing in 2024, but in order to do that, we really need to talk to you, give you a kind of refresh on what happened in 2023. So There are 4 dimensions to digital maturity: digital tools, team culture, customer experience, and data and insights. Not to be confused or confusing, but we also have 4 stages of maturity that exist within this, and I'll explain this in a moment. What do we mean by digital tools? So digital tools is really the technology infrastructure you use to advance your digital maturity. The culture is really a catch-all category. How much the organization is embracing digital. This is about, are you hiring for these roles? Is the sales team on board with this? What about your partners, et cetera? This is kind of the zeitgeist within the organization. Customer experience kind of speaks for itself around, hey, what experience are you producing for customers? This one really is probably the most important of all of them. And then lastly, data and insights, which is we've seen companies that are very digitally mature in the first 3 and very immature in the last one. But here are a couple of examples of what we mean by this. So you're stage 1, which is early stage team culture. If your executives fear what they don't know about digital more than they see the opportunity to embrace the possibilities. So that's an example of team culture. In the next slide, we would show an example of digital tools.
Right.
So, your stage 2 company, for example, if you're utilizing a mix of legacy and modern systems. So you're not fully out of the woods yet. You're not 100% brand new. You've got a mixture of the two. And this one doesn't ever really go away, but it's representative of what a stage 2 company is for digital tools. Data and insights. at stage 3, you're kind of operating with clean data that you can distribute widely, and it's enabling you to start doing customer engagement on a one-on-one basis. And then the last one is kind of an example of a stage 4 company around customer experience, where you got real-time data, where you can do one-on-one customer engagement. And if you're really, really good, you can anticipate customer needs and buying preferences. So that's kind of a quick run through what we did last year to give you a sense for the dimensions, the stages, et cetera. Now this year, this is about how do you go from stage to stage within these dimensions. What we did this year was, in addition to last year, we did dozens of more in-depth interviews. We did a large-scale customer survey. We talked to manufacturers and distributors in the US and Canada, and we really talked to them about how they think about their digital investments and what kind of support what kind of support they are or aren't getting from the C-suite. So that's what we did this year to advise companies about how to get to the next stages of digital maturity.
And Andy, one thing I want to mention about the first report we did was really all about people measuring where they stood, right? So all those dimensions you shared, the 4 stages, you know, that report, which is still available on our website, people can go in and they can download it. And we had lots of people last year score themselves, share where they were. And this year, they would ask the question, gosh, well, how do I mature? How do I advance to the stage 2 in these different areas? And that's really what this next report is about that we're sharing today.
It is. You know, we interviewed all these people, we gathered all this advice, we distilled it down so that we can advise companies about how to go from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and then lastly 3 to 4.
Yeah,
there is no stage beyond stage 4 at this point. But, you know, last year it was, where am I, as you pointed out, kind of, you know, score me in my present state. This year is about how do I move to the next level of digital maturity, and become a more sophisticated, more mature organization.
So we're going to do something a little fun here, Andy. We're going to have a co-host join us for this fun interview. We have a series of interviews today to kind of highlight and you know, bring this all back to the practical as well. So our co-host today, let's bring in Julia Power Puncher Rabkin. Power Puncher says, she says, you don't get things done unless you shake things up. That's your quote, Julia. Welcome. She's with commercetools, Senior Manager, Product Marketing. Say hello.
Hi there. Thank you. Happy to be here with you guys. And, you know, from the commercetools standpoint, we continued our partnership with Master B2B on the SQL report because we see B2B organizations at all stages still struggling with accelerating their digital efforts, measuring and mapping their digital maturity efforts. And I think the assessment that we produced last year is a great framework. It's helped tons of folks have that conversation within their organizations. And we wanted to showcase the voices of real practitioners who are in the trenches, who are doing it, and share some of those experiences and learnings with the broader community. So happy to be here today.
Awesome. Thank you, Power Puncher. Love that boxing name too. And so we're going to stay away from you. We'll see you virtually so you don't punch us. All right. So we have a series of panelists that are going to be joining us in sequence here. So go ahead and go to the next slide. With these folks are, to your point, Julia, they are folks who are they are actually doing the work. They're folks who have been down the path and are going to be really the folks who, you know, we talk to about these concepts, and they're going to give us some of the keys to how they achieve success. There we go. So we'll introduce each of them as they come on, but these are some serious power hitters in our industry. So excited to have them join us. So before we get started, though, we wanted to actually ask the group here. We're going to do a quick poll, our audience today, on which do you think? You know, Andy said, "Hey, customer experience," but we want to hear from you. What do you think the most important dimension of digital maturity is? So we have a poll here up on the screen. Digital tools, team culture, customer experience, or data and insights. Go ahead and place your votes. And while we're doing that, Andy's going to share a couple high-level, kind of interesting and surprising facts we learned in our research. Andy?
Yeah, you know, this year we did a large-scale survey, lots of interviews, and we distilled some really interesting insights from it. Two that sort of jump off the page at us. One, and they're both kind of surprising. One is that B2B companies are increasing digital investment in 2024. There's been a lot of speculation that the market's kind of in a slump and that people are cutting back on their spending. Well, we're not seeing any evidence of that, at least when it comes to digital. So companies are spending more money, and there's probably one overarching reason why, and it's that third bullet point, which I put in bold there, which is that 79% said they are aggressively or very aggressively investing in improving their customer experience. That's what's driving all this. If you don't have a competitive customer experience, you're going to lose. And so it's not a blank check to spend whatever it takes. But if you're using an old system and it can't produce that kind of experience, as often people say to us, I want the Amazon-like customer experience, and I laugh and then come back and say, okay, that and a couple of $1 trillion will get you started. But it is possible to produce really high quality, world-class customer experiences, but you can't do it with rickety old technologies and processes, et cetera. So that was one key point. The other key point was that, and this I think is a holdover or a hangover from the pandemic, is that companies poured a lot of money into digital in the last couple of years in reaction to the pandemic, where everybody was buying from home, et cetera. Now, there's a bit of a reckoning that's happening here where people are being forced to justify what that money went to. And they're not spending less money, to the slide before, but what they are being asked to do is to allocate and sort of attune for what they spent the money on.
Yeah.
And so I've had plenty of conversations with people who are saying, hey, I got CFOs breathing on my back saying we spent $2 million on this. Where's the result? And in some cases, the results are going to take time, which is why it's called return on investment over time. But what we saw very specifically was that 64% of digital executives said that they're being forced to demonstrate an ROI more quickly than they were 3 years ago. This is sort of inevitable. But it's not worth, you can't be ignored.
Yeah, well, with power comes pressure, people, right? And this reminds me of my days in B2C e-commerce, Andy, where hey, show me the money. We're giving you money to invest in these digital tools. So the return. This is, to your point, is inevitable. I mean, before we move off, I'm looking at the people who are joining here, Andy. We've got just an incredible group of people joining this list. Our webcast today. We've got Samar here from Samar Shaheda from Zurn. Kirk Telemanis is here from Fastenal. Kirk, I probably just butchered your last name. Sorry. Sean, the Destroyer Donovan is here from MSA Safety. We've got Jared Abelson from Simpson Strong Tie. I'm Stephen Go for the Jugular Javor here from Schneider. Yeah, we're gonna name the entire industry before we're done. Megan Clark from Airgas, Mark Ferrente from Hershey's. Good to see you, Mark. And we got folks from Petra, Grasshopper Trend. Hey, how are you? Sager's here, Kendall Group, Unger, SHI, Stanley Black & Decker. It's a great group we have joining us. So clearly this is something people are interested in. How do they accelerate their digital vision? Hopefully we have a poll answers up. What did people say? Here we go. Team culture. Thank you. I'm going to, you're kind of stealing my thunder here. I agree completely with all of you. Andy's wrong, because he usually is.
I like how you agree after the poll gets produced.
Oh, come on, dude.
What I was thinking.
Hey, listen. I mean, that way, great minds think alike. What can we say? Julia, you're with me on this. Andy doesn't know what he's talking about. Customer experience is important, but it results from everything else being in place. So, Andy, you start at the end.
Well, let me just say one thing very quickly in defense of customer experience. The company doesn't exist to produce a team culture. The company exists to produce a customer experience. The team culture is a means to the end of producing the customer experience.
Yeah, but you don't have any means. You never get to the end if you don't have any means, Andy Hoar. Come on. All right. You go be VP of e-commerce and I'll beat you.
I'm going to do better. I'm going to keep time for you.
All right, fine.
So
all
go
right.
ahead.
Fine. Well, we just closed the first poll. We got more comments. So now it's time to introduce our first panelist, Theresa, the Maverick Kuske. Theresa comes from a long history of being a world champion in every one of our debates, I think. Right? Did you win every one of our debates, Theresa Kuske?
Yes. I'll pretend that we did.
Pretend that we did. Well, you were in one with me and we lost because we always do.
Yes.
Well, so Theresa is with Chamfr, which is an awesome, cool company. You guys are a pure play vertical marketplace. And you, prior to joining Chamfr, you were at Ergodyne for quite a few years where you built your e-commerce business, right? So welcome.
Yep.
A lot of experience.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. We're excited. And we're going to ask you some questions, given all the experience you've had. about the first one, which I think is the most important, team culture. So, Theresa, you've worked in multiple types of companies, right? Ergodyne, traditional manufacturer, tools, right? Tool or safety equipment.
Safety gear. Yep.
Safety gear, right? And you were the head of e-commerce there.
Yep.
Which, again, Ergodyne, traditional company, 100 years in business or something, right? As most
Yeah, 40 years of business. Yep.
Yeah, something like 100 years, right? And now you're at a vertical marketplace, which is fascinating. So we talk about culture, right? And how do you? So the first question we have for you is how do you build a digital first culture, particularly in a mid-sized company? And as a follow-on to that, is it easier in a pure play like a vertical marketplace than a traditional company? But maybe just talk to us a little bit about, what is it like, or how do you build that digital first culture?
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about the Ergodyne side first, because when this initial report came out over a year ago, it actually came at the perfect timing, because I had been at Ergodyne for 12 years and grew a digital team of experts and ran the e-commerce and multiple other software systems and platforms and the digital marketing there. But it came at the perfect time because I was having these discussions with our C-suite around digital transformation, and I was trying to quantify or figure out how to tell that story to the C-suite so that they would understand. So first and foremost, I mean, I agree with the 41% of people that said that team culture is number one. Sorry, Andy, but it is the team culture, and it does start with the CEO. And so I think that from that perspective, a lot of it, the work actually comes in with change management and really the training, education, and continuous discussions around that, because especially from a business that maybe didn't grow up in a digital world, and they kind of added it on as we kind of grew and knew that it became an important factor in doing business with our customers. That is a change in a mindset, and that doesn't happen overnight. So it does take time, and it's something that you have to work on. I mean, when I first started at Ergodyne, coming from a very digital world, even talking about SEO and SEM was like really, kind of going back to the basics, but it took a while to get to the point where everyone understood what that meant.
So is it easier? Now you're in a vertical marketplace, right? Which is a pretty different business. Is it easier to create that culture there because you're ground up?
Yeah, I would say that one of the biggest reasons I moved to Chamfr was because Julie Schulte, who is the CEO and founder of the company, we had many discussions, and our digital vision and strategy as far as how to grow the company and how to expand our, digital leaders, and not even just saying digital people in those specific roles, but really how do we get sales to be have that digital mindset? How do we get marketing, traditional marketing, to have that digital mindset? So we were talking about those kinds of things well before I initially joined, but that was one of the biggest factors, is that the CEO and I really aligned on our digital strategy and vision and how we would incorporate that into the growth of the company.
And it's fascinating because, I think a lot of people underestimate that point when they move to a different job, to really understand that the culture does need to start at the top, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Some of our other guests here, and I'm sure Mr. Baruch will have some thoughts on this as well, or could contribute on this because he's been down the path. We'll bring Steve in a little bit later. So talk about cross-functional, right? So, and particularly as it relates to your experience with Ergodyne, I think, because you had a traditional sales team there, you had other functions, finance, you had
operations,
inventory allocation, all these different things that can kind of really, create friction in an experience. How do you ensure that these teams are working, cross-functionally to enable a digital first organization?
That's a great question. I think having those cross-functional teams, I was the queen of creating cross-functional teams across the company. I think I probably ran in total 7 or 8 different ones. The last being creating our AI and digital transformation cross-functional team a year before I had left. And a lot of that really driven from the changes with OpenAI launching ChatGPT in late 2022, to then really understanding, that was going to impact our business in the long term, and that everyone kind of needed to get on board. But yeah, you're right. It is challenging because I think a lot of people don't see finance or operations or product development as necessarily needing to understand and truly grasp those digital transformation initiatives and changes, but they do because almost everybody uses technology and software. And as we kind of evolve, it's going to be integrated in more and more solutions. So understanding who's the right people and partners to work with and the software and how are they developing their product roadmaps and things of that nature were things that we needed to discuss and bring up. So we had a monthly meeting that we would kind of sit around and discuss initiatives and changes and roadmaps.
So Andy, Hoar, did you have a question?
No, 1 minute left.
Oh, 1 minute. All right. Well, then I got to go over to Miss Power Puncher over here because I think she has a question she wants to ask. Power Puncher, go ahead and ask. Go ahead and ask the Maverick Kuske.
I do have a question for the Maverick. So, I mean, Theresa is what we would consider a power user of the digital maturity assessment. So she's used it in 2 organizations to drive strategy and change. And I guess my question to you, Theresa, from both of your experiences, what can you share about the strategies for getting executive buy-in and how that's been different from your queen of cross-functional teams, getting that grassroots, kind of general company adoption and buy-in? And how do you think about, managing those 2 strategies kind of from the middle?
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually approached them pretty similarly, where I took the digital assessment and I immediately kind of converted it to an Excel doc and then had it all calculated. But I said, hey, let's kind of all fill this out separately and then kind of see where we all align or think differently and have a discussion around that. But I think what it did is gave us a little bit of a roadmap and a place to get the conversation started. Some of the things I would have added a few other things to that, but that was great because we could kind of identify the gaps or the relatableness to our business and then see how we could build out our digital roadmap. Same thing I did for Chamfr too, is Julia and I sat and the other co-founders, reviewed it and kind of filled it out separately and then came together and had a discussion around it. But yeah, I think it's a great tool and I think can be adjusted to your own digital needs and, of your business as well. So.
Well, I love that it helped you point out gaps, Theresa, and where you could execute and continue development. Okay, we have to go to a poll. The Maverick, your questions, your answers have been awesome. Thank you, and thanks for your insight. So let's go ahead and pull up that poll, Robert. Now the question here is, where would you place your own company's digital maturity related to team culture, starter, intermediate, or advanced? Go ahead and select your your choice there. But Andy, what did you think of that discourse?
Well, I'm going to do something quite unusual here. I'm going to defer to Julia on this, and I'm going to save my powder for later in the interest of time. I'll provide my comment at the end. So I know the interest of time, I'd like to get Julia's comment here, and then we'll move to the next section.
Julia, go ahead.
Well, I think very quickly, also in the interest of time, what we see at commercetools within our customer base, and I think it gets confirmed every year, the 2 years that we've done this annual executive research with Master B2B, is that there needs to be an internal champion or a small group of champions like Theresa has been or has started all of these cross-functional champion teams that are pushing for and evangelizing these digital efforts. But the caveat here is that the champions need to be given the right wingspan to actually make decisions and drive change. And I think this is where the C-suite is critical for getting that organizational wide adoption. And at the end of the day, as Theresa said, it all comes down to change management, right? So it really depends how much buy-in there is and support across the board.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. And that's actually really why I think it's the number one of all of them. But we'll find out what the audience says at the end. We'll reveal those poll results. Okay, we got to go to our next group here, and we have Mr. Andy Sweet G Goodfellow, CTO at Zorro. Andy, welcome to the program. You're coming to us from a skyscraper somewhere in some big city somewhere. Welcome to the show, Andy. Andy's going to talk to you about and ask a few questions. So, Andy, take it away.
Yeah, because I can't wait to ask him how he spends all his time building digital tools to inspire a team culture. I'm sorry, is that what you're spending your life doing, building team cultures, Andy, or are you building a customer experience?
Oh, shut up, Andy.
Both. It's both. I'm doing both.
There's the political answer. All right, so Andy, you and I talked a bit last week about this very issue, and you brought up some interesting points. So we all agree that you have to be an agile, kind of customer first technology shop to be successful, and you got to be wired in and it has to be wired in your DNA. But you brought up an interesting concept, which is distro tech. Can you explain a little bit what you mean by that and how that's relevant to this conversation?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me, guys. So it's kind of a new way of, at least my thinking is shifting when I think about our industry and our kind of space, right? We're a distributor, like an e-commerce distributor, but we're a distributor, but we don't behave like one. Zorro doesn't. Zorro behaves more like a technology company. And that's when I say it's kind of wired into our DNA, that's just the way Zorro's kind of built, right? Digital native, cloud native. Everything we do kind of has a focus around how we can leverage technology to enable an easier job for our customer. And so the more I thought about that, the more I thought, well, we're a distribution company that behaves like a technology company. So maybe there's this thing like distro tech that I can start talking about and thinking about that's kind of who Zorro is, right? This kind of new term. And actually, I can't take credit for it. It was a good friend of mine, Tom Parker, who actually came up with that as mirroring discussions actually at Zorro. At our new offices in the train station in Chicago. And he was like, so it's like distro tech. And I was like, that's mine. I'm taking that. So yeah, it's kind of, it really is, how kind of Zorro's wired. And I think culture, culturally is a big part of that because that's part of who our culture is too. So it's kind of all of it, including the customer experience. So
can you give us an example of what you mean by that? How does that manifest itself? I think you mentioned something about something you can do and that you guys do that a traditional distributor probably wouldn't try and tackle simply because of your more technology, technology fluency. What is that?
Right. So I think what I'll describe briefly, I think actually most B2B organizations can probably get to, especially distribution, because a lot of distributors and just B2B companies in general have really good data, right? They know their customers really well. They probably know their assortment really well, or whatever they're manufacturing really well, and you can use that you can use that in combination with newer digital tools and newer technologies to really enable your experience for your customer and make their lives much easier. Either for us, it would be on site, but whatever kind of channel you might be working in. So I would say Zorro has this unique position where we built a really solid data platform way back in 2018 that we've been leveraging more and more to the point now where we can start really leveraging the new technology tools like large language models and some of the ML. That's kind of on the cutting edge, coming from OpenAI, coming from Google, and we can start doing things like predicting when a package will arrive. Right out of our 13 million SKUs, that can be really challenging to make good customer promises. And if we can start using the newer technologies to really understand, what products are where and how do carriers behave in different regions and where is the customer and that kind of stuff, then I can start making better promises to our customer and vice versa. I can also show those customers better products, right? We want customers to see the right product at the right price and then get it to them right away. And I think that the technologies, we can leverage the technologies to really help those business problems get solved.
So you've talked about this before too, that Zorro has a mindset around the use of technology where it isn't a cost center, it's an enabler. Mm-hmm. Talk to us a little bit about how Zorro arrived at that point and whether you think it's possible to be a digitally mature distributor and not have that mindset.
Yeah, I think it's a challenge, right? Like the traditional IT is very much focused around risk mitigation, risk management, kind of being a cost center, but controlling expenses and those kinds of things. And so at Zorro, we've really pivoted our technology organization into something that's more of a business. It's it really is responsible for revenue, particularly on the website on Zorro.com. So it's kind of how we serve our customer and how we leverage technology for our customer is really what's wired into our mindsets, right? We think about the customer first, and you can phrase that as a business problem too. But at the end of the day, the technology is a tool to solve a business problem or to solve a problem for the customer, and so that's a mindset that, particularly in a technology organization, I think is in a lot of cases pretty new, right? Like how many IT shops think about the customer all the time? At Zorro, our technology organization does. So that's a total mindset starting with the customer on down.
So Julie, I'm going to come to you in a moment for a comment or a question, but Andy, last question for you. So it's pretty clear, and we quoted this from you in the report about you guys see technology and digital tools as an investment and not as a cost center.
Mhm.
But even as an investment, there are roadblocks that you run into, right? There are things that you have to account for.
Yep.
What are some examples of that?
As far as like what roadblocks there would be, I would say we've largely eliminated a lot of roadblocks just in general by empowering our digital product teams and our technology teams. So at Zoro, our teams are kind of highly empowered, right? So there isn't a lot of getting business cases approved and running things up the flagpole to try to, kind of do a mother may I kind of approach, right? So there's a little more of a ask forgiveness instead of permission, but that's not really an accurate statement, but it's more that's kind of the angle that we would take. So roadblocks kind of, they show up in ways that are, like that, where you need to go find approval to spend the dollars or approval to make changes to the customer experience or approval to stand up new technologies. But if you have the data, and you're doing active experimentation with your customers, you know what the right decision is to go build. And so we've empowered our technology teams to just go build those right now. Tell us what you're doing, but there isn't a lot of, hey, I'd like to seek approval to change the way returns work, the experience of returns, or to change the way my account pages work, or recommendations carousels. Right? They're very empowered to go do that themselves.
Got it. Okay, so Julia, you had a comment, question about this?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think for everyone on this call, right, it's, if you saw one of the last webcasts we did, Sweet G's digital tooling dimension got a stage 4, which I think, if we're being honest, it's a bit of an ideal state or a goal for most other organizations. So hats off to Sweet G for leading that success. But what I think most folks don't know about Zoro is that it's not the technology itself that makes them stage 4. It's that they view technology as an enabler of their business strategy. And I think what's really in place at Zoro is that business strategy. And so I think, Andy already shared it a bit, but the way that folks that work at Zoro get started with new technologies, it all starts with solving for a real business problem and then scaling that out. And so that MVP, proof of concept, that kind of incremental approach is really begin to move fast, and the tooling obviously enables that. But it's not just because you have the best tools that all of a sudden you're going to be stage 4. It's because the business strategy is really there beforehand. So I think that's like a really important thing to emphasize.
Yeah. I think the only thing I'd add onto that, Julie, you're right, is a big part of my job is creating clarity in business context to my team so that they understand what are the right things that we're after for our strategy? And then they have access to the data to confirm those, or to come back and say, oh, we think your context might be a little bit off. This is the data we see. We should do this thing instead. And, by and large, they're pretty empowered to go make those calls and let me know. So, yeah, I agree.
So we know Sweet G is in the enviable position of being a stage 4 digital tools company from last year. Let's find out where everybody else is on this call. So Andy, thanks so much for joining us. Robert, if we can go to the poll, where would you place your own company's digital maturity regarding digital tools? Are you a starter, intermediate, or advanced? This is for the audience viewing this. So, Brian, what did you think?
Well, I mean, great comments. I always love listening to Sweet G. Because, I mean, he's talking about, I lived this challenge where to get to a mature stage with digital tools, you have to give enough to the users, to the business users. He was talking in terms of tech, but in Zoro, IT and tech is the business user essentially. So being able to allow and empower the business user with a flexible platform to allow them to make changes based on what they're seeing, he said almost ask for forgiveness. Well, that's almost an Amazon-like approach, right? Where you're making a business case, you're testing, and if and you're basing it on data. So, amen. I think that that what he said is really, people should be listening to that. And the distributors who are on the call today should really pay attention to that, because it's an important element. Of course, I'll argue that you have to have the right culture before you can get to that point, right?
Of course you will.
Right, but I mean, I've lived it. I've been hamstrung by having to business case things to death, by being hung up by non-responsive or difficult to work with technologies and that sort of thing. So I think that, and I think the one other comment I'll make is just about resourcing, because we can have all great tools. But we also have to think about, and I hear this time and time again from practitioners, I underestimated the effort it would take from a resource standpoint to actually use the tools. So just having a PIM in place, for example, is not enough to solve your data problem. You have to allocate team to it, things like that. Always be thinking about that, folks, when you're investigating this. It's not just the tool. It's one piece of it. So anyway, Julia, any thoughts from you?
Well, I mean, I think I didn't want to say it so explicitly at the beginning, but I really think I'm on team Andy Hoar here. I think it really does come down.
Stop. Let's repeat that, just so everybody hears.
No. Man, my payoff didn't work.
Customer experience is the North Star. And I think this comes up in the research that we do, but I think we also see it within our commercetools customer base. Those organizations that choose to put customer centricity or customer obsession, whatever your favorite term is, as the North Star for everything they do, including their business strategy, they then find that composable technology actually enables them to serve their customers with unique and differentiated experience. And ultimately, that's the end goal. So I think if you build your business strategy around customer experience, then ultimately that does become the North Star for everything else.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Cool. All right. Well, for sake of time, we got to move on to our next section here. And we are thrilled to introduce one of the leaders, one of the folks who has done this, one of the most frankly respected executives in our industry, Steve the Brander Baruch, former CMO at MSC Industrial. I mean, gosh, every time I talk to you, Steve, I learn so much, and I'm really grateful that you're here with us today to talk about this next topic, which is investing in customer experience, Andy Hoar's favorite topic. But anyway, Steve, welcome. Glad you're here.
No, thank you for having me. And what a great lead in, Julia. Thank you for that. Switching teams, or at least, validating Andy's position. I think it's the right decision.
All right. And Steve, we could have a little debate here because I can use your own words against you on team culture here. So
this is true. I've got one foot in both camps here.
You do. Yeah. I know you do. So let's stay on it.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right. So you are one of the most accomplished executives in our field. You built MSC Industrial, I think, truly into a digital first company. You were there for, 15 years or so?
Yep.
Something like that, yep. Right? Tremendous amount of revenue from digital channels. Where does it, when you think about where you started, how did you build the business case for digital, including, measuring the ROI from it? And I'm curious also how things changed over that time period, right? And you were first doing this, 16, 17 years ago, right? With MSC. Give us a little bit of context on the ROI.
Yeah, so interesting, right? And I it sounds a bit self-serving, but I think it was actually harder before. I mean, Andy just mentioned at the top of the call that now 79% of folks are investing in customer experience, right? That certainly wasn't the case 15 years ago. And there's some research that I think Andy may have even penned way back when, and it's been updated from Forrester, that kind of keeps me up at night. And I wanted to share that because I think a lot of people on this call get it, but we've got to convince people behind us that customer experience isn't this soft, squishy, warm and fuzzy soft science that's looking for hard dollars. It's real. And that the research, Andy, that I was referring to, and this is the updated stats, right? Millennials now make up or they influence 3 out of 4 B2B buying decisions, and they're making nearly half of the actual final decisions. And maybe even scarier yet, Gen Zs now are going to make up about 20% of our B2B buyers in 2024, right? So both of these demos are digital natives, notorious for their expectations of their digital channels, and even more known for how quickly they will divorce a company when they have a bad experience.
Right.
Specifically, so if this doesn't keep you up at night, I don't know what will, but this was reported that 60% of millennials and 50% of their Gen Z counterparts have actually stopped doing business with a company after just one bad experience, right? Wow. And since these are millennials and Gen Zs, they don't keep that to themselves, of course, right? That then it's all of their social channels, all of their IMs, right? Everybody in their network. One bad experience. I mean, today, I can't imagine that it is as difficult to justify a case to really focus on and invest in CX and customer experience.
Yeah. So, Steve, how do you define customer experience? I mean, like you said at the beginning, get this big kind of squishy thing, right? What is customer experience? How'd you think about it, and how did it evolve over the years at MSC?
Yeah, so I think customer experience, customer service, and go down the litany of all of the interactions that you have with the customer all kind of form this amalgama, right? And so what we would always try to do is to look for multiple listening posts. We had a very aggressive Net Promoter Score system. We had a very prolific customer experience engagement system, with some of the best technology that we could get. We would leverage focus groups. We would leverage our CRM system, like every available voice of customer element that we could then pull together to get a true, objective, kind of neutral third-party read into what are our customers actually experiencing, and then triangulate that and measure it over and over and over again, and then democratize that data across the organization so everybody got to feel what our customers' experience was and what impact they were having on it.
Mm-hmm. And how did you? So you're sitting in a CMO seat, right? You're sitting in the C-suite. Your peers, did they understand this? Did the folks who could you get them to understand the value of this from even from an ROI standpoint? Go ahead.
So they didn't have to necessarily understand the complexities of a net promoter system or how CX was calculated or measured or managed or what have you.
Right.
And here's why. If you can create a correlation from NPS to EPS, then you've got their attention, right? And I use that a little bit glibly, but we were able to create clear correlations between customer experience, whether it's that amalgama of, but improvements in customer experience that led to improvements in the business. And it shouldn't come as a huge shocker, Brian. McKinsey talks about CX leading companies outperforming their peers in total shareholder return by 65%. The other stat that they use is that those leaders versus laggers tend to grow at about a 2+ growth rate.
Wow.
So you got to take that data and then personalize it to your business by correlating it to the experience that your customers are receiving.
Fantastic. So let's talk org structure briefly. You think about the digital side of customer experience. How do you make sure you have the right org structure? And as an ancillary to that, who actually owns the digital customer experience? That's a big question we get in a lot of our roundtables. So talk about the org structure generally, and then talk specifically. I got one. Okay.
Yeah. And look, I think it's the TLA argument, right? A TLA is a 3-letter acronym, so it's a CXO or a CIO or a CDO or a CTDO. And I would take that and say, look, the title itself is secondary. Is there someone who clearly has ownership and accountability for the customer experience, right? I think that is what it really boils down to. Is in most organizations, when you start to talk about customer experience, what I found is you hear people say, well, this person, sales, marketing, operations kind of own or share the customer experience. And one of the memorable tropes that we used back in my last shop was that if you have more than one owner, you don't have an owner. And I think that's easy to remember, and it actually is very, very true. So the point is assigning the owner, title them whatever you want, but empower them. Make it clear within the organization what their authority and expectations are and how important it is, and then let them do their thing.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Well, Julia, I think you had a question for the brander Baruch here.
Hey, Julia.
I did. Well, my question for the brander is around what advice would you give to other practitioners on what and how they could do to generate ROI or show some kind of positive results in the short term while not taking their eyes off of the prize on kind of the long-term strategic investments that need to be, and whether you have any insights or advice into how those decisions could be made or how you would suggest slicing what's the short-term low-hanging fruit versus the long-term strategic investment.
Yeah, no, great question. And I'm sure others on the webinar will feel the same kind of phenomena, that immediate gratification that you're talking about and that you're looking for, right? That's kind of last click gratification. And I think that ultimately, as much as we as practitioners want to be more strategic, first click, top of funnel minded and thinking about big investments and big opportunities to move mountains, in terms of ROI short term and to build credibility, focus lower in the funnel, right? Focus closer to the last click than the first. And then, and this will be no surprise, test, right? Using the kind of test, learn, show the result, test, learn, show the result. And then use that success to climb back up the funnel, right? If you try to start at the top of the funnel with, big, and they are more difficult attribution level investments. It's just a harder, much harder road to hoe. Starting with something closer to ground level and then earning your opportunity to move back up, I found that to be successful.
Yep. Look for those quick wins. Okay. Well, Brandon Baruch, we're up on time. Thank you very much. We had to bring up our poll question. Let's go ahead and pull that up. Where would you place your own company's digital maturity related to customer experience, starter, intermediate, advanced? Thank you again, Steve, for your thoughts on all of that. Obviously, great experience. Andy, what are your thoughts on what Steve communicated?
Well, first of all, I think we need to alert our affiliates. We're going to be running long, so we're a few minutes behind schedule. But I've always wanted to say that. No, I think Steve captured it in one phrase, and I never heard this before, and I love it. I'm going to steal it, Steve. You branded it, but I'm going to steal it. From MPS to EPS. I
like that. Yeah,
I love that because it does draw that parallel between the two. It draws a line between the two of them. And he's right. The farther you go down in the funnel to the last click, the conversion experience, the easier it is to measure this stuff. But of course, as he'll point out, you don't get to the bottom of the funnel unless you do something right at the top of the funnel.
Yep. What about you, Julia? Any thoughts or takeaways from Steve's?
I mean, I'm a firm believer that the customer should be the North Star. So I think focusing on that experience is ultimately what generates business results, right? And I mean, I know that Forrester study that's the Brander was referencing, right? It's like organizations that put the customer first, they have 2.5x higher revenue, 2.5x better growth margins. So everything is kind of super positive. But I think, we've all been in organizations where it's a lot easier to look at things from the inside out. And I think that what a customer-centric approach or a customer as the North Star approach requires is that you really put yourself in the shoes of your customer. You really understand them. You understand their pains. You understand what their journey is, because only then can you begin to make it better, to make it frictionless, to optimize it. But, that requires a deep knowledge of the customer, which I think most B2B organizations actually have, which is an advantage.
I agree. However, Julia, I'm going to win you back over to my side here because you can't prioritize the customer experience unless you have the right team culture. Right, Steve Baruch?
Oh, God, we're doing this again?
Yeah, we are. Come on. All right, folks. Well, thank you very much.
I'm not opposed to team culture. It just, to me, is a means to the end of the experience. It's not the opposite. And too many companies, I think, get caught. That's the reason I'm kind of having fun with this. Too many companies get caught up in the culture being the end in and of itself. And it's not. You can have a great culture and no business, and you're gone.
Yeah, but
dude, you have a bad culture and a great business, you're still going to exist. We're
going to play foosball all day and do dance discotheque. Is that what he said? Oh no, it was distrotech, not discotheque. So okay, fine. You can have a great. It's how you define the culture and what does that mean? I mean, and the way we've defined it in our maturity model is it's about a digital first thinking. It's about alignment of the organization. It's about hiring the right people, bringing people in from other outside the organization, in some cases, from B2C in some cases, so they understand the best practices and then forming consensus. And we talked a lot with Theresa about that. So there's a lot to that. And in fact, that leading to our takeaways here before we get to our poll results. I mean that was my major takeaway from all of this, including the study, including the paper we published, including the conversation we just had, is that the team culture is number one. It has to start, Steve was saying the different titles, CDO, Chief Digital Officer, the CEO needs to have that role. I think that ultimately is the most important thing. It's more important than tools. We can buy, sorry, Julia, commercetools is a great tool. You can buy the tool. It's there. The best practices are there. The customer experience, we know, just look at Amazon. Okay, everybody, we know all those things. Okay. So now we need culture to deliver it.
We know you're going to be doing campfires and offsites and having great fun, getting everybody on board with the culture.
No, dude, it's not about that?
Well, everybody else is over there building a great customer experience. But yeah, and we should go to Julia and get some final thoughts here.
That's what, yeah. Julia, please.
So Julia, what are your thoughts
Keep us
overall
sane.
on the different areas you heard? This is the second piece of research, so it added, I think, more thought leadership to the process. But what are your kind of final thoughts here?
She's on my side.
Yeah. I think, kind of on the team culture and, customer experience debate, I think they go hand in hand, right? Like customer experience needs to be your North Star because that's what you're delivering internally. The how you do it is your team culture, is your tools, is how much you're using data and insights and all those other dimensions that are really funneling that. But I think one of the things that I've realized from, our last 2 years of kind of doing, 2 rounds of this research, producing 2 reports, seeing people actually use the assessment is we sometimes don't fully appreciate or acknowledge the complexity and volatility of changing market conditions and the impact that they have. And I think this is where you begin to see the real value of what technology do you have? What are your tools? What is your culture like? Can you kind of weather the storm? What is your business strategy, right? Like, is your business strategy even aligned with some of these changing market conditions? So obviously at commercetools, I have to plug it. We're pioneers, we're a market leader of the composable approach. But I think the real value of the composable approach is that it allows your business the flexibility and agility to be able to adapt, right? And so regardless of whether it's the next pandemic or if what's the generation after Gen Z, I don't know, but when they start entering the workforce and their buyer expectations are going to be completely crazy. I'm an elder millennial, so I identify with many of the things that
millennial. Wow.
On the older side of the millennial spectrum. But I think, regardless of what new channels come out or, what customer preferences there are, if your business is set up in such a way that you can weather the storm, you have that flexibility to be able to pivot. This is where I think the real value comes from. And then specific to the maturity model, I think the real chasm to cross in all four dimensions is between stage 2 and 3, because that's really how you start differentiating when you're kind of on the starter intermediate side to the intermediate advanced side. But I think regardless of where you are in digital maturity, and I've spoken to organizations at various stages, none of this happens overnight. Not digital maturity, not digital transformation, digital acceleration. It all takes time. And so what our panelists recommended about building cross-functional teams, about taking an incremental approach, really starting small and then scaling it up, I think this is the real way to kind of, continuously over time with investment. I think this is the real way to drive digital maturity, transformation, and change. And, everyone out there is not alone because I think everyone is accelerating it. It doesn't matter what point you're starting from.
That's great. Thank you, Power Puncher. And I agree with you 100%. And I encourage folks to, and we'll have the reports are staying up on our website. You can download them there. We also have a link in our deck here. So you can take a look at that and encourage you to run that analysis for yourself and see where you stand, and then read our follow-on report this year that will help you move ahead based on the learnings from folks like Sweet G and the Brander and the Maverick. So let's go ahead and reveal our poll results. We asked people at different stages here where they thought they stood from our audience. So Robert, if we're ready, why don't we go ahead and bring those up first? And we had team culture, and most folks felt intermediate was where they were, 47%, followed by starter, and advanced only 20%. So I think that's an honest assessment, I would think, of where people stand based on who we're seeing here. Let's go ahead and go to the next one. Digital tools. Wow, only 6% in advanced. Starter and intermediate was a tie. Interesting. Fascinating. So some work to do on digital tools, obviously, and in both areas. And how about the third one? Customer experience, intermediate. Your own customer's digital maturity relating to customer experience, 50% said intermediate, starter 44%. Andy, it's nice to get honest answers. Thank you, everyone, for it's anonymous, obviously, but it's good that folks are really considering where they are. And again, you might not give yourself enough credit in some places, so we encourage you to take the digital assessment for yourself, last year's report, and then again read this year's. So.
Well, what's interesting is that intermediate is a qualitative description. As Julia just pointed out, there are 4 stages.
Right.
and intermediate straddles the fence between 2 and 3. And
Right.
there is kind of a chasm in the middle where you go from being a caterpillar to a butterfly. And so intermediate is still kind of an amorphous area. And so it'd be interesting to know more specifically where I am. That's why the test last year, the scoring methodology, actually allows you to get more specific on that front.
Yeah, no, exactly. Awesome. Thanks everyone for joining us today. What a great session, Andy. I learned a lot from our practitioners. I encourage you guys to go ahead and download. Here's your 2 versions of the downloads, and with the websites, you can go in and get those. There's no cost to those.
Yeah, just go to masterb2b.com / there you go, establishing a baseline report. It's also in the chat window and also Digital Vision. So it's nice to do both because you want to kind of score, as you pointed out earlier, figure out where you stand and then read the second part to figure out how to move to the next level.
Well, thanks everybody for joining today. We will see you on our next webcast or Friday 15 or in person at one of our roundtables. Thanks everyone. Have a good day.